The morning sun cast long shadows across Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona as Major Sarah Tank Morrison walked toward her A-10 Thunderbolt II. The aircraft sat on the tarmac like a sleeping beast, its distinctive twin engines mounted high on the fuselage, and its fearsome Gu-8 cannon protruding from the nose. Other pilots called the A-10 the Warthog because of its ungainly appearance, but Sarah saw something beautiful in its brutal functionality. Sarah had been flying A-10s for 8 years, longer than most pilots in her squadron. She had earned her call sign Tank, not just because she flew the tank-killing aircraft, but because of her stubborn determination to push through any obstacle. Today, that determination would be tested in ways she never imagined. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as Colonel Martinez outlined their mission. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces had established a heavily fortified position in a narrow mountain valley overseas. The terrain was treacherous, with steep canyon walls rising over 1,000 feet on both sides. Traditional bombing runs from higher altitudes had proven ineffective due to the natural protection the valley provided. The target is embedded deep in the canyon, Colonel Martinez explained, pointing to aerial photographs displayed on the screen. Previous attempts from standard attack altitudes have failed to neutralize the threat. The enemy has positioned their equipment strategically, using the canyon walls as natural shields. Sarah studied the photographs intently. The valley was incredibly narrow, barely wide enough for 2 aircraft to fly side by side. The walls were jagged and irregular, creating dangerous wind patterns that could easily slam an aircraft into solid rock. Most concerning of all, the target sat at the very bottom of the canyon, requiring an approach so low that it seemed impossible for a fixed-wing aircraft. "Ma'am, what altitude are we talking about for this mission?" asked Captain Rodriguez, one of the newer pilots. Colonel Martinez hesitated before answering. "Initial calculations suggest we need to fly at approximately 50 feet above ground level to achieve the necessary angle of attack." A collective intake of breath filled the room. 50 feet was dangerously low for any aircraft, but for an A-10 flying through a narrow canyon, it bordered on suicidal. The Thunderbolt II was built tough, designed to take damage and keep flying, but it was not known for its agility in tight spaces. "Sir, has anyone attempted a canyon run at that altitude in an A-10? Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "Negative, Major. This would be unprecedented. The flight characteristics at that altitude in such confined terrain are largely theoretical." Sarah's mind raced through the physics involved. Flying that low in a canyon would create a ground effect, where the aircraft's wings would generate additional lift due to their proximity to the valley floor. However, it would also create significant turbulence and require split-second reactions to navigate the twisting canyon walls. The margin for error would be virtually non-existent. After the briefing, Sarah found herself alone in the hangar, staring up at her A-10. The aircraft had carried her safely through countless missions, from close air support operations to tank-busting runs in open desert. But this mission was different. This mission would push both pilot and aircraft beyond their tested limits. Chief Master Sergeant Williams, the squadron's most experienced crew chief, approached with a concerned expression. "Major Morrison, I've been maintaining A-10s for 23 years, and I've never heard of anyone attempting what you're planning." Sarah nodded, understanding his concern. "Chief, what's your honest assessment? Can this bird handle the stress of canyon flying at 50 feet? The seasoned sergeant walked around the aircraft, his experienced eyes examining every surface. "The A-10 was built to take punishment, ma'am. The titanium bathtub protecting the cockpit can stop 23mm cannon rounds. The engines are mounted high specifically to avoid ground debris during low-level operations. If any aircraft can do it, it's this one." He paused, placing his hand on the aircraft's wing. "But, ma'am, the real question isn't whether the aircraft can handle it. The question is whether any human pilot has the reflexes and skill to navigate a canyon at that speed and altitude." Sarah appreciated his honesty. She had always prided herself on her flying abilities, but this mission would require more than skill. It would require instincts honed to perfection and the ability to make life-or-death decisions in milliseconds. That evening, Sarah sat in her quarters studying every piece of available information about the target area. She analyzed wind patterns, studied geological surveys of the canyon walls, and calculated approach angles until her eyes burned from staring at the computer screen. The more she learned about the terrain, the more daunting the mission became. Her phone rang, interrupting her concentration. It was her younger sister Lisa, calling from their hometown in Ohio. "Sarah, I saw on the news that your squadron is deployed again. Are you safe?" Sarah smiled despite her anxiety. Lisa always worried about her, having never fully understood why her sister had chosen such a dangerous career. "I'm fine, Lisa. Just another mission. You always say that, but I know you're being evasive. What aren't you telling me?" Sarah hesitated. She couldn't discuss mission details, but she also couldn't lie to her sister. "It's a challenging assignment. Probably the most difficult flying I've ever attempted. More difficult than when you were shot down last year." The memory of that day flashed through Sarah's mind. Her A-10 had taken heavy ground fire during a close air support mission, and she had barely managed to nurse the damaged aircraft back to base. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about staying calm under pressure and trusting her training. "Different kind of difficult," Sarah replied. "That day was about survival after taking damage. This mission is about precision and pushing the envelope of what's possible. Sarah, you know I support everything you do, but promise me you'll be careful. You're the only sister I have." After ending the call, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just representing herself on this mission. She was carrying the hopes and concerns of everyone who cared about her, as well as the reputation of female pilots in the Air Force. The next morning brought pre-flight preparations unlike any Sarah had experienced. Every system on the aircraft received triple checks. The flight computer was programmed with the most detailed terrain maps available. Emergency procedures were reviewed and rehearsed until they became automatic responses. As Sarah strapped herself into the cockpit, she ran through her mental checklist one final time. The mission profile was burned into her memory. Approach the canyon from the east, descend to 50 feet above ground level, maintain precise navigation through 3 major turns, deliver ordnance on target, and exit through the narrow western opening. The radio crackled to life with Mission Control's voice. "Tank, you are cleared for departure. Weather conditions are optimal, with minimal wind in the target area." Sarah started the engines, feeling the familiar vibration of the twin turbofans spooling up to full power. The A-10's engines were reliable workhorses designed to operate in harsh conditions and capable of running on various types of fuel. Today, she would need every bit of their dependable power. As she taxied toward the runway, Sarah caught sight of Colonel Martinez and several other pilots gathered near the control tower. Their faces reflected a mixture of admiration and concern. Everyone understood the magnitude of what she was attempting. "Tower, tank requesting permission for takeoff. Tank, you are cleared for takeoff. Winds calm, visibility unlimited. Godspeed, Major." The A-10 rolled down the runway, gathering speed until the wings generated enough lift to pull the heavy aircraft into the morning sky. Sarah climbed to cruise altitude, using the flight time to the target area to review her approach procedures and calm her nerves. Below her, the landscape gradually changed from flat desert to rugged mountains. As she approached the target area, Sarah could see the canyon system stretching across the terrain like a series of scars in the earth. The valley containing her objective was clearly visible, a narrow slash between towering rock walls that seemed to close in on themselves. Sarah began her descent, feeling her heart rate increase as the altitude needle moved steadily downward. At 2,000 feet, she could make out individual rock formations on the canyon walls. At 1,000 feet, the details of the terrain became sharp and clear. At 500 feet, she could see the target area nestled deep within the canyon's embrace. Control, tank beginning final approach. Descending to mission altitude. Copy, tank. All stations are monitoring. You have green lights across the board. Sarah pushed the stick forward, diving toward the canyon entrance. The A-10 responded smoothly, its heavy frame cutting through the air with surprising grace. The altimeter unwound rapidly as she approached the point of no return. At 100 feet above ground level, Sarah leveled off and lined up with the canyon entrance. The rocky walls rose on both sides like massive stone sentries. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the throttles forward and dove into the narrow passage that would either make aviation history or become her final flight. The moment Sarah entered the canyon, the world around her changed completely. The open sky disappeared, replaced by towering walls of red and brown rock that seemed to reach up and grab at her aircraft. The A-10's altimeter read 48 feet above ground level, lower than she had ever flown in her entire career. Immediately, Sarah felt the ground effect taking hold of her aircraft. The phenomenon occurred when an airplane flew close enough to the ground that the air cushion between the wings and the surface created additional lift. While this could be beneficial in some situations, in the confines of the canyon, it created unexpected control responses that required constant adjustment. The first challenge came within seconds of entering the canyon. A crosswind, funneled and accelerated by the narrow passage, caught the A-10's large vertical stabilizer and pushed the aircraft toward the southern wall. Sarah's hands moved instinctively on the controls, applying rudder pressure and slight aileron input to counteract the wind's effect. Control. Tank is in the canyon. Wind conditions are more severe than predicted, she reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Copy, Tank. Winds at base are still calm. You're experiencing localized canyon effects. The canyon floor rushed beneath her at over 300 miles per hour, a blur of rocks, scrub brush, and occasional patches of sand. At this altitude and speed, there was no room for error. A momentary lapse in concentration or a small mechanical problem would result in immediate impact with either the ground or the canyon walls. Sarah approached the first major turn, a sweeping left curve that would test both her skills and the A-10's maneuverability. The canyon walls seemed to close in as she banked the aircraft, maintaining her precise altitude while navigating the turn. The outside wall rushed past her right wingtip with what felt like inches to spare. The A-10's design characteristics that made it perfect for close air support also created unique challenges in canyon flying. The aircraft's large, straight wings provided excellent stability and weapons carrying capacity, but they were not designed for high-speed maneuvering in tight spaces. Sarah had to constantly fight the aircraft's natural tendency to maintain level flight, using all her strength to make the necessary control inputs. As she completed the first turn, Sarah encountered an unexpected phenomenon. The canyon walls created a Venturi effect, accelerating the airflow and increasing her ground speed beyond what the engines were producing. The speedometer climbed past 320 miles per hour, faster than she had planned for this portion of the flight. Tank, your ground speed appears to be increasing, came the voice from Mission Control. Confirmed, Control. Canyon is accelerating airflow, adjusting throttles to compensate. Sarah pulled back slightly on the throttles, but the speed reduction was minimal. The physics of the canyon were working against her, creating conditions that no flight simulator had ever replicated. She would have to complete the mission at a higher speed than planned, making the already difficult navigation even more challenging. The second turn approached rapidly, this one a sharp right curve followed immediately by a left dogleg. This was the most dangerous portion of the flight path, requiring 2 rapid direction changes while maintaining precise altitude control. Sarah began the first turn, feeling the G-forces press her into her seat as she banked the heavy aircraft. Halfway through the right turn, turbulence from the canyon walls hit the A-10 like a giant invisible hand. The aircraft bucked and rolled, and for a terrifying moment, Sarah felt the left wing drop toward the canyon floor. She immediately applied opposite aileron and rudder, fighting to level the aircraft before it could enter an unrecoverable descent. The turbulence was unlike anything she had experienced. In open air, turbulence was usually predictable and manageable. Here in the canyon, the air currents bounced off the rock walls in chaotic patterns, creating sudden updrafts and downdrafts that could slam an aircraft into the ground without warning. Sarah completed the first part of the S-curve and immediately began the left turn. The canyon walls flashed past in a blur of colors and textures. She could see every crack in the rock, every ledge and outcropping as she threaded the A-10 through the narrow passage at impossible speeds. During the left turn, Sarah encountered another unexpected challenge. The morning sun, now higher in the sky, created deep shadows on the canyon floor that made depth perception extremely difficult. What appeared to be level ground from a distance revealed itself to be a series of ridges and depressions that could easily catch an unwary aircraft. Control: Tank is experiencing severe turbulence and visual challenges due to terrain shadowing. Copy, Tank. Continue mission as able. As Sarah exited the double turn, she found herself in a slightly wider section of the canyon. For the first time since entering the passage, she had a few extra seconds to assess her situation and prepare for the final approach to the target area. Her fuel consumption had been higher than planned due to the constant throttle adjustments needed to maintain control in the turbulent air. The stress of high-G maneuvering and continuous control inputs had also taken a physical toll. Her arms ached from fighting the controls, and sweat stung her eyes despite the cockpit's air conditioning. But the A-10 was performing flawlessly. The rugged aircraft absorbed the punishment of canyon flying without complaint, its systems operating normally despite the extreme conditions. The titanium cockpit that surrounded Sarah felt like an impenetrable shell, protecting her from the hostile environment just feet away. As she approached the target area, Sarah could see the enemy installation nestled against the northern canyon wall. The position was indeed well protected, invisible from higher altitudes, and shielded by natural rock formations. Previous bombing attempts had failed because pilots couldn't achieve the necessary angle of attack to penetrate the defensive positions. Sarah armed her weapons systems, feeling the familiar click of switches and the subtle change in aircraft handling as the ordnance became active. She had chosen a specific combination of precision-guided munitions designed to be effective against hardened targets in confined spaces. The target grew larger in her windscreen as she lined up for the attack run. At this altitude and angle, she would have only one opportunity to deliver her weapons accurately. There would be no second chances, no opportunity to circle around for another attempt. Control: Tank has target visual. Beginning attack run. Copy, Tank. You're cleared hot. Sarah fine-tuned her approach, making minute adjustments to her flight path while maintaining the critical 50-foot altitude. The target area was now clearly visible, and she could see the defensive positions that had proven so elusive to previous attacks. The A-10's heads-up display showed her weapon systems aligned and ready. The aircraft's advanced targeting systems had locked onto the primary objective, and the firing solution was optimal. Sarah's finger moved to the weapons release button, ready to complete the mission that everyone had said was impossible. At this moment, flying at an altitude no A-10 had ever attempted in such terrain, Sarah represented more than just one pilot completing a difficult mission. She embodied the spirit of aviation pioneers who had always pushed beyond the accepted limits of what was possible. The canyon walls blurred past as she held her attack heading, the target growing larger in her sights with each passing second. In a few moments, she would either successfully complete the most dangerous low-level attack in A-10 history, or become another cautionary tale about the limits of human ambition. The radio crackled with updates from Mission Control, but Sarah barely heard them. Her entire world had narrowed to the target ahead, the altitude reading on her instruments, and the feel of her aircraft responding to her commands. Everything she had trained for, every hour of flight time, every lesson learned from previous missions had led to this moment. Sarah's thumb hovered over the weapons release button as the target centered in her crosshairs, knowing that the next few seconds would determine whether she made aviation history or paid the ultimate price for attempting the impossible. The moment of weapons release arrived with crystal clarity. Sarah's thumb pressed the button, and she felt a familiar jolt as the precision-guided munitions separated from her aircraft. The A-10 immediately became lighter and more responsive as the ordnance fell away, following their programmed trajectory toward the hardened target below. "Ordnance away," Sarah reported, her voice calm despite the chaos surrounding her. The weapons struck their target with devastating precision. Even at her low altitude and high speed, Sarah could see the secondary explosions as the munitions penetrated the defensive positions that had withstood previous attacks. Debris and smoke erupted from the canyon floor, confirming successful target destruction. "Control, tank reports direct hits on primary target. Target neutralized. Outstanding, tank. Now get yourself out of there safely." But Sarah's mission was far from over. The weapons delivery had been the easy part compared to what lay ahead. She now had to navigate the remaining portion of the canyon and exit through the narrow western opening, all while dealing with the additional challenges created by the explosions behind her. The blast effects from her weapons had stirred up massive amounts of dust and debris, reducing visibility in the already challenging environment. Particles of sand and rock peppered her aircraft, creating a sandblasting effect on the canopy and external surfaces. The A-10's rugged construction absorbed the impacts without damage, but Sarah's forward visibility was significantly reduced. More concerning was the effect of the explosions on the air currents within the canyon. The heat from the blast created powerful updrafts that caught the A-10 and lifted it dangerously close to the canyon rim. Sarah pushed the stick forward aggressively, diving back down toward the 50-foot altitude that provided her margin of safety. As she flew through the dust cloud created by her own weapons, Sarah relied heavily on her instruments to maintain proper altitude and heading. The outside world became a brown haze punctuated by occasional glimpses of canyon walls. Her training in instrument flying, practiced countless times in simulators and actual weather conditions, became crucial to her survival. "Tank, we're showing altitude variations on your transponder signal," came a concerned voice from Mission Control. "Confirmed, Control. Dealing with blast effects and reduced visibility. Maintaining as best able." The dust began to clear as Sarah moved away from the target area, but new challenges immediately presented themselves. The western portion of the canyon was even narrower than the entrance, with walls that seemed to lean inward toward each other. The passage was barely wide enough for her A-10's wingspan, leaving virtually no margin for error. Sarah approached a section where the canyon made a sharp S-turn before opening to the exit. This was the most technically demanding portion of the entire flight, requiring precise timing and control inputs to navigate the serpentine passage without striking the walls. The first turn came up rapidly. A sharp left followed immediately by a right. Sarah banked the A-10 into the turn, feeling the aircraft respond sluggishly due to the ground effect and confined space. The left wingtip passed within feet of the canyon wall, so close that Sarah could see individual layers of sedimentary rock in perfect detail. As she rolled into the right turn, a sudden crosswind caught the aircraft and pushed it toward the northern wall. Sarah reacted instantly, applying opposite rudder and aileron to counteract the wind's effect. The correction was successful, but it cost her precious altitude. The A-10 descended to 42 feet above ground level, lower than any tactical aircraft had ever flown in such terrain. Control, tank altitude, now 42 feet, still maintaining safe flight. The response from Mission Control carried a note of amazement. "Copy, tank. You're making aviation history with every mile." Sarah was acutely aware of the historical significance of her flight, but her immediate focus remained on survival. The canyon exit was now visible ahead, a bright opening that promised escape from the stone corridor that had tested every aspect of her flying skills. But the exit presented its own unique challenge. The canyon walls narrowed to their absolute minimum width just before opening to the outside world, creating a bottleneck effect that accelerated the airflow and created severe turbulence. Sarah would have to thread her aircraft through an opening barely wider than her wingspan, while dealing with the most violent air currents of the entire flight. As she approached the bottleneck, Sarah could see the wind patterns written in the dust and debris swirling around the canyon mouth. The air was being compressed and accelerated through the narrow opening, creating a jet effect that would grab her aircraft and potentially slam it into the rock walls. Sarah made the decision to add power and accelerate through the danger zone rather than trying to fly slowly and precisely through the turbulence. She pushed the throttles forward, feeling the twin engines respond with increased thrust. The A-10 leaped forward, its speed climbing past 350 miles per hour as it approached the narrowest section of the canyon. The turbulence hit like a hammer blow. The aircraft bucked and rolled violently, and Sarah felt herself thrown against her restraint harnesses as the A-10 fought the chaotic airflow. For several terrifying seconds, she lost all sense of aircraft attitude as the horizon spun wildly outside her canopy. Sarah's instrument training took over, allowing her to recover control using her attitude indicator and airspeed readings rather than trying to rely on visual references. She leveled the wings and pulled back slightly on the stick, trading some of her excess airspeed for altitude as the A-10 shot through the canyon mouth like a bullet from a rifle barrel. Suddenly, the canyon walls fell away, and Sarah found herself in open sky for the first time in what felt like hours, but had actually been less than 10 minutes. The sensation was overwhelming after the claustrophobic confines of the canyon. The horizon stretched endlessly in all directions, and the A-10 seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as it returned to the environment for which it was designed. Control, tank is clear of the canyon. Mission successful. The radio erupted with congratulations from Mission Control, ground crews, and other pilots monitoring the frequency. Sarah had accomplished something that military aviation experts had declared impossible just days before. But even as she climbed away from the canyon system, Sarah remained professionally focused on completing her mission safely. She conducted a thorough aircraft systems check, examining every instrument and indicator to ensure that the extreme conditions hadn't caused any damage or malfunctions. The A-10 had performed flawlessly throughout the ordeal. Despite being subjected to conditions far beyond its design specifications, every system continued to operate normally. The aircraft's legendary toughness had been proven once again, this time in an environment that tested the very limits of what was mechanically and aerodynamically possible. As Sarah set course for home base, she reflected on the mission she had just completed. The successful weapons delivery was important for immediate tactical objectives, but the real significance lay in expanding the envelope of what was possible in military aviation. Her flight had demonstrated that skilled pilots in properly designed aircraft could operate effectively in environments previously considered prohibitive. The lessons learned from this mission would influence tactics and training for years to come, potentially saving lives by providing new options for future operations. The radio crackled with a message from Colonel Martinez. Thank outstanding work. Intelligence reports confirm complete target destruction. You just rewritten the book on low-level tactical operations. Sarah smiled inside her oxygen mask. She had proven that determination, skill, and the right aircraft could overcome seemingly impossible odds. More importantly, she had shown that female pilots were capable of achieving the same extraordinary feats as their male counterparts. As the familiar silhouette of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base appeared on the horizon, Sarah began her approach for landing. The routine procedures felt almost surreal after the intensity of canyon flying, but she welcomed the return to normal operations. The tower cleared her for a straight-in approach, and Sarah configured the A-10 for landing. The aircraft that had performed so magnificently in extreme conditions now settled into the familiar pattern of a standard approach, demonstrating the versatility that made the Thunderbolt II such an effective platform. As the main landing gear touched down on the runway with a gentle thump, Sarah realized that her life had changed forever. She was no longer just another A-10 pilot. She had become the pilot who proved that flying at impossible altitudes was indeed possible, opening new chapters in military aviation history through courage, skill, and unwavering determination. The A-10 A-10 rolled to a stop on the tarmac at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, its engines winding down with the familiar whine of cooling turbofans. As Sarah shut down the aircraft systems and completed her post-flight checklist, she could see a crowd gathering around her parking spot. Ground crews, maintenance personnel, fellow pilots, and base leadership had all come to witness the return of the aircraft that had just made aviation history. Colonel Martinez was the first to reach the A-10 as Sarah climbed down from the cockpit. His face showed a mixture of relief, pride, and amazement that she had successfully completed what many had considered a suicide mission. "Major Morrison, how do you feel?" he asked, shaking her hand enthusiastically. Sarah removed her helmet, her hair damp with perspiration from the intensity of the mission. "Like I just learned something new about what's possible, sir." The A-10 performed incredibly well under conditions we never imagined testing. Chief Master Sergeant Williams was already conducting his preliminary inspection of the aircraft, looking for any signs of damage from the extreme low-level flight. His experienced eyes examined every surface, checking for impact damage from debris, stress fractures from the violent maneuvering, and were patterns that might indicate system problems. "Major, this bird looks like it just came back from a routine training mission," he announced with obvious admiration. "Whatever you put this aircraft through, it handled it like the tough old bird she is." The crowd around the A-10 continued to grow as word spread throughout the base about the successful mission. Young airmen stared in awe at the aircraft that had just proven that the impossible was merely a matter of finding the right pilot and the right approach. Within hours, news of Sarah's achievement began spreading beyond the confines of the airbase. Military aviation publications picked up the story, followed quickly by mainstream media outlets fascinated by the tale of a female pilot accomplishing what male pilots had declared impossible. The phone in Sarah's quarters rang constantly over the following days. Reporters wanted interviews, aviation magazines requested detailed accounts of the mission, and military historians sought to understand the significance of her achievement in the broader context of aviation development. "Sarah, this is incredible," her sister Lisa exclaimed during one of their phone calls. "You're famous. They're talking about you on the national news." Sarah felt uncomfortable with the attention, preferring to focus on the professional aspects of her accomplishment rather than the personal recognition. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone, Lisa. It was about completing the mission and bringing valuable intelligence back to our tactical development programs. But the impact of Sarah's flight extended far beyond tactical considerations. At the Pentagon, senior Air Force leadership recognized that her achievement represented a fundamental shift in understanding about aircraft capabilities and pilot limitations. General Patricia Thompson, one of the highest-ranking female officers in the Air Force, requested a detailed briefing on the mission. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of presenting her experiences to a room full of generals and colonels, explaining the technical aspects of ultra-low-level canyon flying to officers who would determine future training and operational policies. "Major Morrison, your flight has implications for close air support doctrine that we're still trying to fully understand," General Thompson explained after the briefing. "You've demonstrated that terrain previously considered prohibitive for fixed-wing aircraft can actually be navigated successfully with proper preparation and exceptional pilot skill." The Air Force immediately began developing new training programs based on Sarah's experience. Simulator software was updated to include canyon flying scenarios, and test pilots began experimenting with similar missions in controlled environments. Flight instructors studied her techniques, incorporating her methods into advanced tactical training curricula. Sarah was selected to lead the development of a new training program, working with engineers and test pilots to create realistic scenarios that would prepare future pilots for extreme low-level operations. The work was challenging and rewarding, allowing her to share her hard-won knowledge while continuing to push the boundaries of what was possible. 6 months after her historic flight, Sarah received notification that she had been selected for promotion to lieutenant colonel. The promotion board specifically cited her groundbreaking achievement and her subsequent contributions to tactical development as primary factors in their decision. The promotion ceremony took place on the same tarmac where she had returned from her Canyon mission. As Colonel Martinez pinned the new rank insignia on her uniform, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that morning when everyone believed flying that low was impossible. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, you've not only made history, you've created new possibilities for every pilot who follows in your footsteps, Colonel Martinez said during the ceremony. Your courage and skill have expanded our understanding of what dedicated professionals can accomplish when they refuse to accept artificial limitations. The ceremony was attended by pilots from across the Air Force, many of whom had traveled specifically to witness the recognition of the woman who had redefined the possible. Among them were several young female pilots who saw Sarah as proof that gender was no barrier to achieving extraordinary things in military aviation. After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by Captain Jennifer Hayes, a newly qualified A-10 pilot who had just completed her initial training. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for showing us that we can accomplish anything if we're willing to work hard enough and never give up," Captain Hayes said. "Your example has inspired a lot of us to set higher goals and push ourselves beyond what we thought was possible." Sarah smiled, remembering her own early days as a young pilot, looking up to the experienced aviators who had paved the way before her. "Captain, the most important thing I learned from that mission wasn't about flying technique or aircraft capabilities. It was about the importance of thorough preparation, staying calm under pressure, and trusting your training when everything around you seems impossible." The tactical applications of Sarah's achievement continued to evolve over the following years. Her techniques were refined and incorporated into standard operating procedures for special operations missions. The A-10 community developed new capabilities for operating in previously inaccessible terrain, expanding the aircraft's already impressive versatility. Military historians eventually classified Sarah's Canyon flight as one of the most significant single-pilot achievements in modern aviation history. Her mission proved that individual excellence, properly applied, could overcome technological and physical limitations that had previously been considered absolute. But perhaps the most lasting impact of Sarah's achievement was its effect on the next generation of pilots. Young aviators, both male and female, grew up knowing that a female major had accomplished something that experienced test pilots had declared impossible. Her example became a standard part of aviation lore, inspiring countless pilots to approach their own limitations with creativity and determination. Years later, when Sarah had achieved the rank of colonel and was commanding her own wing, she would often tell young pilots about the importance of pushing boundaries responsibly. "The goal isn't to be reckless or to prove points," she would explain. "The goal is to expand our capabilities in service of our mission and our country." Sarah's A-10, tail number 79-0147, was eventually retired to the National Museum of the United States Air Force, where it stands as a testament to both the aircraft's rugged design and the exceptional pilot who proved that flying that low was not only possible, but could be done safely and effectively. The museum placard next to the aircraft tells the story of Major Sarah Morrison's historic flight, but it also includes a broader message about the importance of challenging assumptions and refusing to accept limitations without thorough investigation. Today, canyon flying at ultra-low altitudes is a standard part of advanced tactical training for A-10 pilots. The techniques developed by Sarah and refined through years of practice have saved lives and completed missions that would have been impossible using previous methods. Sarah's legacy extends beyond her individual achievement to encompass the principle that determined individuals can overcome seemingly impossible challenges through preparation, skill, and courage. Her flight proved that the phrase impossible often means not yet accomplished rather than cannot be done. The woman who was once told that flying that low was impossible became the pilot who proved that with the right combination of skill, determination, and aircraft, even the most daunting challenges could be conquered safely and successfully. Her name became permanently associated with pushing beyond accepted limits and achieving what others believed could not be done.